poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Coach Brad Wilson. Today's Tuesday, which means it's a tactical day. A lot of strategy conversations that are about to go down. Welcome, my co-host, John. How you doing, sir?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Hitting the new year in full stride. Ready to get after it. Do we have a theme for today's episode?
So the theme is based on actually the topic that we've been going over the last couple of weeks in the Wolves CFP program. We've been working on 4-bet pots, both as the Preflop caller and Preflop Raiser. So sticking with that theme that we've been covering in Wolves, we're going to go over a couple 4-bet pots.
Nice. I also had an idea for future theme in case the CPG listener wants to chime in the Slack channel and say, good idea, bad idea. I thought about what if we reviewed hands that we previously reviewed from, a year and a half ago and just looked at them through the lens in which we look at poker now and kind of see the differences in how we think about spots compared to a few years ago. I think it might be.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Might be cool.
We probably have to. Yeah. It's a good idea.
Yeah. All right. So that'll give us loads of content down the road. We have so many themes that you can look forward to, CPG listener. Unless, of course, you think that's a terrible idea. And if you do, then you got to go to Greatness Village and let us know. Speak your piece. Else, that's your opportunity to vote. If you don't vote, well, you're just going to get it. So, all right, 2023, Tactical Tuesday. Let's go. 4-bet pots. Hand number one. Break down the action, John.
We're in the cutoff. Ace of clubs, king of hearts, ace king offsuit. Make it 25. Button 3 bets to 80. As promised, this is a 4-bet pot. So I 4-bet to 235. Button calls.
Pretty. About as vanilla as it gets with ace king off, opening from the cutoff, facing a 3-bet, just pure 4-bet. Obviously, quite a good hand. Mm-hmm. You get quite a bad flop, I think. 6, 7, 9 with the 6, 9 of clubs.
There's hope there.
There's always hope, You have the ace of clubs, king of hearts. So I guess we'll start here. There's 45 in the pot, so SPR is like 1.7-ish. I guess we'll start here.
I think this board is maybe on first glance looks a little scarier than it actually is. I think like some of the ultra strong hands, like the 10-8s and 8-5s, just not in the button 3-bet range. Probably if it for some reason was in the 3-bet range, I doubt it would be in the 4-bet call range. So I think like the really strong hands that the button has on this board are going to be like just the sets, like 9s, 7s. I don't know what he does with 6s, so maybe he has 2 combos of sets, maybe 3. Still just planning on kind of pushing what I perceive to be like an overpair advantage on this board and like a just general range advantage. And starting out with a range C-bet on the flop, that's just going to be my go-to in 4-bet pots.
For whatever it's worth, I don't know if you actually have like a range advantage here or an equity advantage. The button should be calling most of their suited connectors. I don't think we're 4-betting all of our suited connectors, and the button's jamming ace king, so like they don't have ace king in range and we do, which is just like more combos of high cards.
Yeah, they have some really good hands. You're right. They have some like 7-8 and 8-9 that are like, really really high equity.
7-8, 8-9, 9-10, even 5-6. Like they just have like they have a decent amount of equity in their range just by having the suited connectors.
Yeah.
So I don't think it like necessarily that we're like pushing a giant equity advantage here by betting.
Yeah. That's I just completely forgot about that that portion of the range, which is really, really high equity. So I'm gonna retract what I said about range advantage, but I'm still gonna start out with a c-bet on the flop because
Of course you are. We can't redo it now. So you've started out with a c-bet.
I don't know how else to start 4-bet pots. So
well, the other option would be to check. I think if you have two options, one is to bet and one would be to check. I think open folding is a bit much. We can probably discount that pretty heavily.
Open fold and check seem pretty close in EV to me.
I mean, I think the equity distribution could just be such that you're supposed to check range here instead
maybe
of
that's
bet range.
Given like how many strong like suited connector hands just smash this board, I'm really rethinking my flop strategy now.
Yeah.
Anyways,
but we're here. We can't undo it.
Yep.
So you bet a quarter. Villain calls. So flop is 6-7-9. What does the turn do? It just like totally bails you out. We have a ace of diamonds on the turn, which is incredibly good for us. And now the SPR is under 1, so we have a decision as to how to proceed here.
I guess the flop really was the first decision, but in my mind, like I said, I was just range betting the flop and didn't put a ton of thought into it. So yeah, this was going to be like my first real question about this hand. I think we have an option to keep betting here, or we could check. I think there are lots of hands in our range that have now been kind of demoted to bluff catchers, namely like the jacks through kings portion of our range. So there are hands that like naturally just kind of want to check call. I don't know like what a lot of our ace-x does. I'm assuming a hand like ace-5 suited that 4-bets pre probably just checks this turn quite frequently. On the flip side though, if I was bluffing, like if I had like king-jack or king-10 suited or something like that, I would be so happy about this turn that I'd probably blast.
Yeah, I mean, I think your like sizing options are fairly limited. Like even though the SPR is under 1, I think small bet is really your only option as it relates to sizing.
Small bet. Yeah.
Yeah. that is your blast. Yeah. Is another small bet on the turn. It's quite an interesting situation where some portions of your range get demoted and then other portions of your range get promoted quite drastically, and then how to manage both of those. Yeah, it's interesting. I think like, yeah, betting small is probably the path that I would take. Just you can clearly get called by much worse. Kind of hard for worse to start betting the turn. I think like those 5, 6s, 7, 8s, 9, 10s are just going to almost always check back on the turn ace. There's really no reason for them to bet. So like probably the only hands that they bet versus check would be like their flop low equity calls. And I don't know that necessarily there's enough of those to really go for betting. Plus, when they have those low equity calls on the flop, they're almost all of them are blocking the hands that they're trying to fold out, which is another conundrum here for the in position player.
What are some of those low equity calls that you're imagining right now?
Like king queen suited, king jack suited, jack 10 suited. Like they all block the portion that they're targeting to fold. Queen jack suited. Like, you mentioned like your king jack and king 10 would be the king highs, right? That you're like happy to keep going to war with. Well, all the cards that block you from having those hands, which would be their lower equity calls on the flop, just don't make good barrel candidates. So I think like, yeah, you just almost have to bet the turn here.
Okay. I didn't.
Cool. Well, I don't know. That's classic Jon. So you don't bet the turn on the ace. And I guess give me the rationale for not betting the turn.
I thought SPR 1, I mean, we can still get stacks in comfortably on the river. Again, I think a lot of it just goes back to my like poor ranging of villain on the flop, right? I think that if I had seen all the 5, 6s, 6, 8, 7, 8s, 8, 9s, I would have seen the small bet on the turn like much more clearly. But yeah, I think like a really important thing that you mentioned though is that like I really don't, even if I saw those 6, 8s and 8, 9s and whatever, like if I checked here with ace king, I would be really surprised to see the button bet ever, right? And if that's like something, if that's what I'm expecting, then yeah, I should probably be putting in some money with Ace King myself. But in my defense, it's SPR1. It's not like, it's not like we have some major issue
There's-
on the river getting stacks in if I check a street.
There's like some really interesting hypotheticals here because like with that analysis on the turn, right? With like a hand such as queens on this turn, would it just become a check fold? Seems like almost certainly, right?
What about a hand like Ace King?
Hand like Ace King. That's a really good question. Like, would it almost certainly become a, like, maybe not a check fold on the turn to like the quarter, but facing the river jam, like, or maybe you should just jam versus. No, you shouldn't jam versus the quarter because the quarter is going to be polarized. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, it's when ranges are so narrow, like it just creates these kind of interesting conundrums with these type of hands. Like maybe you just shouldn't check queens. Maybe you should just bet a quarter with queens and then play rivers appropriately because you block, you block ace queen, which is probably their primary value hand.
Yeah.
That hits the turn, and then you can get value from worse. And yeah, checking is very tricky. It's all very tricky, I think. So anyway, you go ahead and check. And they check behind, which is good. Like much better to face the check behind than to face a bet.
Sure.
And the river is a 7, so 6, 7, 9, ace 7, no flush completed. I guess we'll go back to your decision here. The podcast listener did not see the action that you chose. So now you have SPR under 1 again, and board pairing river to bet or not to bet. That's the question.
Yeah. So I want to hear what you already saw what I did. So
I did.
hear what you say.
By accident. It's quite a situation that you've put yourself in, I think, because I'm not sure. I am not sure whether you should like bet or check. I think when you check the river, you're kind of banking on villain turning pairs into bluffs to target like the 10s through kings portion of your range and banking that you don't check an ace twice. Maybe they could value bet worse. They could jam worse facing double check. So maybe you get
Okay. Can I tell you what I think?
Yeah.
I think that there's a really, really big portion of villain's range that wants to jam the river, and it's not just pairs. I think it sort of goes back to what we talked about on the turn, that we don't expect villain to turn hands into bluffs on the turn because like they just block the range that they're targeting, right? Like the king queens, the queen jacks that all float the quarter on the flop. Or not float, but all call the quarter on the flop that don't stab the turn. And so like I think there is this like huge chunk of the range that's like just nothing on this river. And like yeah, it sucks that when we check here, the thing is like I don't even know if it sucks. Like let's say he has a bluff catcher. Let's say he has like 10s or jacks or like 9x or something on the river. Does that call the jam, like the river jam? I don't know. I'm not exactly sure.
Doubt it.
I'm also like fairly certain that like he would value cut himself sometimes with a hand.
The problem is all those hands block your low equity hands, like jacks, for instance, or 10s.
Sure. Like I'm not sure if those hands are going to call, which I think makes me just want to check like slightly more. I think it like, it
for the Tactical Tuesday listener, by the way, I want to clarify on what John's like backtracking on the use of the word float. Like there's like the common usage of the word float and then like an internal way that we use it, and those are quite different. So, when Jon said, no, they didn't float the flop. Like it basically, they did float the flop based on the most common definition of float, just not in our definition of it, if that makes sense. Wanted to clarify that because I'm like actively trying to not say float on the flop myself, even though, that would be like the most common way to phrase it. But anyway, so basically like all those hands that you're just opening the door for like all the like suited broadways to rip the river basically and say.
And also, just like one last thing, I think a lot of the hands that call or like are happy about calling just jam the river themselves, like just value themselves the way that you see.
That was sort of what I was getting to with like the ace queen, ace jack, ace tens, even ace five probably value jams the river. Yeah. Because like it's just too juicy of a spot to check back top pair.
Looks like I have kings, queens, jacks.
Exactly. Yeah. If they put the money in with their ace X on their own, and then they put the money in with their, the bluff region on their own, then and they don't call with their bluff catching region at a high frequency, then I think checking just is got to be the preferred path.
Yeah. That's where my mind was at and on the river.
Yeah. So you check villain jams, and they have the jack 10 of spades. So well done. Ha, got him. And if you would have bet the turn, I wonder what they do. I guess they just have to fold the turn.
Yeah. I think even
they just have to fold the turn.
Yeah,
they just have to fold. All right, good hand number one. We've been getting a little verbose, I've noticed, in our Tactical Tuesdays lately. 15 minute segment. Man, look at us go. All right, stick around for the break. Can't promise another 15-minute hand. 6 or 7. I think that should be good enough to please everyone. 6 or 7. Yeah.
Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.
All right, welcome back from the break. We have hand number 2 in this 4-bet themed episode of Tactical Tuesday. John, dive right into the action.
Got another pretty good hand in the cutoff. King of clubs, king of diamonds, make it 25. The button 3 bets 75. We're gonna 4-bet again to 225. Button calls.
Poker's easy when you just play all the best hands.
Yeah, maybe what we should teach is just get dealt really good hands to cut off when you're gonna get 3-bet by the button.
Yeah, that's in the onboarding webinar of Wolves. Is make sure that you just get dealt really good hands very, very often, and then print money. That's basically the path to playing winning poker.
We teach that in like week 2, I think.
Yeah. We have multiple levels of the class. There's a 101, a one, just Shu's currently getting his master's degree in this skill set. So you 4-bet, villain calls, you 4-bet 225, so there's 465 in the pot. You've got 775. Behind,
Jack
flop
5
is Jack
deuce,
5 Dewey, Rainbow.
And it's a 4-bet
So again,
pot, so you know me.
So you bet a quarter. Just a shocker of all shockers that you bet a quarter here. I think just it is the thing to do, so there's really nothing to talk about there. Turn is a 10. SPR's a little bit more than 1 here. So I guess we'll talk again where the decision kind of hinges on the turn.
Yeah. Don't know what the best line of action here is. I mean, our hand is still really good, still good enough to value bet, certainly. There's no shortage of Jack X, which I'm sure the button is very unlikely to fold. I think he probably has everything down to Jack 10 suited, which is now top 2, but certainly has Queen Jack, King Jack, Ace Jack. Yeah, I mean, seems pretty close between betting again here or maybe checking, allowing some of their bluffs to bet the turn.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like, you're probably going to either put everything into one bucket or the other, and if you're not, randomizing in some fashion, right? Like you're just going to put all your hands in the check bucket, or you're going to put all your hands in like the bet quarter bucket. I think that the bet quarter bucket makes sense here. But I said that last time, so maybe you'll just stick it all in the check bucket again.
I can't do anything right on the turn, apparently.
No, I'm just betting more than you, and you're checking more than me. So yeah, you go ahead and check the turn. Assume that you're checking range, right? Like,
yeah, I also think that like the 10 is a little bit meaningful in the sense that I think it does reduce the value, the bluff catch combos that can call a quarter on the turn. Like part of the range that I'm targeting is hands like pocket 10, or are hands like pocket 10s, pocket 9s. Like those are sort of hands that I hope are in there. This demotes 9s as well as improves 10s. So I don't know if that's like a little bit of a concern for you, but it was like kind of in the back of my mind.
yeah, I guess the problem would be like, how do you get action from 9s anyway? Like, what's the real path to like trapping a bet?
Sure. It's
I don't
hard.
I don't know if they're like
call a jam on the river.
no, but they may call a small bet on the turn.
Right. Exactly.
When you have like ace king, ace queen, king queen, like in range. So like, I mean, you're essentially playing for one bet against that specific hand. And so like the question is like, are they more likely to call it on the turn or the river? I'm not exactly sure which one is true. But I think like their Jack X is probably just going to call 3 bets no matter what you do. So I guess like the merits of the merits of checking here, you tell them to me.
The merits of checking here is the first one I can think of is we allow the button to put money in with really low equity hands or bluffs. One of the things I was thinking about is like we block like one of the most natural low equity bluffs on the turn, which would be like king queen. So maybe that's like another strike on
doesn't
like,
help
reasons not to check. Yeah. So yeah, and like, are there even like that many low equity hands to begin with that like stab the chart? Like, there's ace queen, there's king queen, there's
7-8.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there are enough. Maybe there's just enough like 6-7 of spades. Like 8-9 of hearts, like those types of hands. In his stabbing range on the turn. I mean, like we have to remember that this is button versus cutoff. Like we said in the previous hand, they are going to have all those suited connectors. I think all the ones with backdoor flush draws, definitely all the ones with backdoor flush draws and backdoor straight draws are going to call a quarter on the flop. So I don't know. I'm starting to like check a little bit more now.
Yeah, it's probably like the second loosest out of position 4-bet formation besides small blind versus big blind. So just quite a loose scenario here where both of you still maintain a fair number of combos, like relatively speaking to 4-bet pots and other positions. Okay, so like basically trying to trap bets from their like 6-7s and almost no equity type hands.
Right.
I would be a little concerned that like ace queen, like their highest low equity hands don't always bet.
Yeah.
Because they want to fully realize,
Yeah.
that would be like a little hitch that like the hands that they do want to bet would be like they're 6-7 of spades, like those type of hands that are just like whatever, I've got
jam on me. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So villain goes ahead and bets a quarter for you after you check.
Yeah. I think we have another decision here.
Yeah, probably a pretty big one.
Jam or let them hang themselves.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of rope being sold in this town for their self-hangings.
So jam?
Probably. I think like you do have natural low equity hands that can check jam the turn. I don't think it's like crazy.
I mean, I'm like, presumably I'm checking range on the turn, right? So
sure.
I have king queen, I have ace queen, ace king.
I mean, it's really tricky. Like ace jack, does ace jack call the jam, right? Like so like, ace jack is probably the best hand they have that you beat, right? Because they probably don't have queens, they just jam those free. So like ace jack's the best hand they can have that has you beat. Does ace jack on a deuce river jam for value? I don't think so. You know, it's just too hard to get called by worse.
Yeah.
Maybe they do, but I don't know that they do it at a high frequency. Like,
So do you think that they call the check jam here on the turn more frequently than they jam the deuce river?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because you have like ace queen, ace king, and king queen in your range. So like they can, you know, they can just like shrug, bet, call the turn with ace jack.
Yep.
But, you know, again, if they have like some ace queen that they just decide to bet the turn and jam the river, then that's obviously good for us too.
Or the 6-7 of spades.
6-7 of spades is obviously great for us. That doesn't fall under the good category.
Oh,
that falls under the really, really good category.
Right.
So you go ahead and check call.
Just sticking with the theme. Maybe the theme is like, I asked Brad what he would do, and then I do the opposite. Yeah, I mean, just trying to keep all those really low equity hands in, the ace queens in, the 6-7 of spades in.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yep.
And it's not that like that's not a viable path, right? It's not that like, I think that the listener really needs to know that like we're trying to find the best one, and it's not that like one is not viable or the other is not viable. It's just like we're trying to find the best path possible here. And I think like check calling is definitely a quite a good path. Like the just making the argument for another path essentially. River's an 8, so bricks all their ace queens, bricks their king queens, bricks their 6-7 of spades, which by the way, they're pretty much all bricks for 6-7 of spades. 973 in the pot. Villain's got 515 left. They check, or you check, villain jams, and you just call.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing it's going to end well for you.
No, he rivered a set.
Wow. You tricked the podcast listener. They can't see.
Sorry.
No, villain has ace queen. They don't have a set. You max out value against ace queen off, which, yeah, I mean, like, if you're maxing value versus ace queen off, which is 16 combos here, like, maybe that's just good enough to make the case for check calling, because, yeah, they're just going to have so many different combos of ace queen here.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to have every ace queen. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's going to, like, those 16 combos make up a significant portion of their full range at this point because of the fact that it's a 4-bet pot and ranges have, you know, gotten reduced sort of at every single node. So, like, yeah, maybe check calling twice, targeting even only ace queen. Like, maybe that just outperforms
that's a good point.
Small betting.
Yeah, you maybe need to throw in all the 6-7 suiteds.
Yeah, that's just, like, kind of icing on the cake, right? Yeah. Nice. So I promised, 6 or 7 minutes. We got a good 10 minutes here in the second hand. So we still overperformed and under promised. So good for us. I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Tactical Tuesday. Let us know your thoughts on my idea proposal in today's show.
If there's like a specific hand that you'd like to see re-reviewed.
Yeah, a specific episode, a specific hand that you'd like to have us reanalyze. That would be interesting as well. Let us know in Greatness Village. You can also tweet at me at CPG Podcast on the Twitter. And that's all I have for today's episode.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter at CPG Podcast.